Everyone is welcome here, it's time to make new friends. Fill your Glencairn. Share a dram with the spirit of Edmonton. Luncha!
And good evening, Whiskey Brothers, Whiskey Sisters, Whiskey Friends, and welcome to episode 47 of the Canadian Whisky Journey's Whiskey Review. I'm Dolph, I'll be your host tonight, and I'm joined by Bill Ashburn, the creative genius and master blender at 40 Creek. Bill, thank you very much for coming on tonight, and I've got to say, congratulations. 35 years in the industry, and all the adulation Campari Group is throwing at you right now is well earned. And this is what we're celebrating with you tonight, and which is nice because it is a celebration of Bill Ashburn's 35-year legacy. So I've got this in my glass. Do you as well?
I do as well, Dolph.
Excellent.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully we can shed some light on not only Art of the Glen, but on 40 Creek as a whole.
Excellent. Well, and a lot of it's about you. I interviewed, Chris a couple times, but we had a big interview 2 years ago, and I asked him tons of questions, but I had a lot about you, and he tried to attempt to answer some of them. And I might ask some of the same ones, and we'll see if Chris knows what he's talking about or not. So,
Chris and I are usually on the same page.
Yes, I believe that. Well, you're on a lot, and Whiskey Weekend, you've gotten ready for it. It's this weekend. We're going to talk about that in a second, but before we start, I'm gonna embarrass you, I think, a little bit, because I'm going to give people a little bit of information they'd see on your curriculum vitae right now. So we're trying not to embarrass Bill, but we're going to say a lot. So he's a lovely person, and here's the other stuff. So 2019 Canadian Whisky of the Year, the 22-year-old rye, which I can't get my hands on, even though I know Blair and Davin really well. Neither one of them's giving up their samples. So maybe you could talk to them about that this weekend. 2020 Whiskey of the Decade was Confederation Oak, which I have right there. Here's one of the older ones, though. 2020, also Distillery of the Year, and this is the New York International Spirits Competition. 2020 Canadian Master Blender of the Year, New York International Spirits Competition. Tons of accolades as well from Davin, and what you do at the Whiskey Festival. Are you going to the Victoria Whiskey Festival this year? Will you be there?
We intend to.
Excellent. Good stuff. So
we should add, Dolph, we were actually also Canadian Distillery of the Year at the New York Spirit Awards this year.
Ooh, congratulations. Fantastic. How did I miss that? I'm usually online and I see all Chris's stuff. So how do you do it? How do you become it? It just, you're the creative genius behind it. So are you going to take a lot of the accolades, which I think you deserve, or are we spreading it out for?
The reality is I work in the background developing liquids. There's a lot of people involved in the process.
Mm-hmm.
The really kind of cool thing about my job or passion, however you want to describe it, is I get ideas from liquids from all over the place, both from the outside world and from within our own company. Okay. So it's, for me, I get to run with other people's ideas is the easiest way to put it.
Perfect. Well, you do run with it and you have fun with it, I'm hoping, I think. I'm going to talk about your first 4 jobs, I believe. And then I'm going to ask you essentially what you learned from the 4 people or the first 4 jobs, because I think this covers the majority of what you did out of university. So you graduated in 1980 university from Niagara College in the Chemical Engineering Technology program. Is that right?
That is correct.
First employed at an oil additives company for about 7 months until a position came up at Jordan and St. Michel's Cellars. And then you wanted to get involved with the wine industry, and you're able to use your skills maintaining liquid consistency and product development. I kind of want to hear about that, how that kind of linked from one job to the other. You worked there until that company was sold, and you took a position at the Reader Distillery, so Auto Reader's Distillery in 1987. And you put out a relatively small amount of spirits each year, as well as wine under the Kittling Ridge name. But I think you put out a whiskey there.
So let's be a little bit more clear on that.
Okay.
Kittling Ridge did not come along until 1992.
Ooh, okay.
When John Hall purchased the company from Otto Reeder. So
okay. Yeah.
At Reeder Distillery, we were strictly a distillery and primarily involved in eau de vies, which were Mr. Reeder's passion.
Yeah.
It was part of his heritage. His grandfather had a distillery in Austria, and he wanted to produce eau de vies in Canada. Unfortunately, eau de vies at that time were not really to the Canadian palate. So in order to pay the bills, he expanded into more mainstream products such as whiskey. Okay.
And do you have any of that whiskey still around? Because I think it was a 3-year-old whiskey that you produced with him, right?
Yeah, we had a product called Canadian Company. And we do have some amounts of that. In fact, this whiskey weekend, one of our seminars is 40 Creek Through the Ages. And we're actually going to be tasting not only an eau de vie from the Reeder Distillery days, we're actually going to be tasting one of the whiskeys, Canadian Company, from back in that time frame.
That sounds like such fun. And we're talking about it now. I'm just going to throw some pictures up just for a quick second with them. So we have the whiskey weekend, like we've just mentioned, and that's happening Friday and Saturday.
Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday. Sorry. Okay. And it's the 16th annual whiskey weekend. And if you look on kind of the middle here, we've got the master blender, Bill Ashburn. But if we look at, here's the events. But here's more of the details you said. So 40 Creek Through the Ages, and that's the one you're referring to. And you're doing this with Davin and Blair as well as Chris. So, and I love listening to these guys. So Blair's usually on me on Tuesday, and I miss him. But he's working really hard to get ready for this on Saturday. Davin's always working really hard. He's he's a fun guy to listen to. So I'm looking forward to that. But you know what? I'm looking forward to this one more. Your all-time favorites, and I want to know what. I'm not asking you now because I want to watch it. I want people to watch it on the weekend. But this really interests me because I've talked to Davin, I've talked to Blair. The 22-year-old is important. I'm going to guess that it's one of the top 3 for Davin, as well as the 3 grain that you started with way back when, like your first 3 grain. I think he's going to have those 2 on it. And Blair, I think it's going to be the Portwood, and I think it might be that one right there, the Double Barrel Reserve up there. It's been a while. So those are my 2 guesses. I've got it online. I wanted to put it out there. So I think that's going to come out.
Well, I'm not going to share too much of what we're going to do because we're planning on it being a surprise for the attendees at the seminar. Unfortunately, I would love to include the 22-year-old rye in this, but much like you, I can't get my hands on any. I have 1 bottle left, and it's unopened on my bar at home. I'm not willing to open it up for this weekend.
No, you should take your time and do it whenever you want. How many bottles? Could you tell me that? I was looking for this information because I was looking at the information from, it was Victoria's Whiskey Festival that you won Whiskey of the Year with that. And I was looking at that and I couldn't find any information. So how many bottles? I think it was really, really limited.
It was really limited. We actually did 108 bottles.
Okay.
It was all hand bottled.
Okay.
The story of that liquid is actually quite interesting. It was when I was really kind of, shall we say, young and foolish.
Okay.
In that liquid was completely done by hand. All of the grains.
Say the story. You had the sacks. You pulled. How many sacks did you put in all by yourself?
I believe there was 20 sacks. Okay. And we're talking 50-pound sacks.
Okay. Open them up.
If somebody asked me to do that today, I'd walk away from it.
You've got people to do that. That's 22 years old. 22 years younger. Or actually 25 years younger. I could have done it then as well, 25 years ago. Now I would have my son or someone else do it for me, or anyone else that would possibly be just happy.
But when I think back on that project,
yeah,
I started that project really just to see what was possible.
Okay.
And to be quite honest, the liquid that came off the still was at the time very disappointing to me.
Okay.
It wasn't what I expected. It was very rough and coarse.
Okay.
And we continued to taste that liquid annually. And I would say for the first 5 years, everybody who tasted it said, blend it off, get rid of it.
Okay.
I didn't.
Whiskey. Yeah. Good.
Stuck with it.
Yep.
And eventually we bottled it.
You held your ground. Good for you, Bill.
I think though we, over the years, we probably sampled more than 108 bottles of it.
Well, that's okay. And I'm going to ask, when you did it way back when, did you use enzymes? Because that was less likely to happen then than it is now with
back then we did use enzymes on that particular
because it was 100%
rye and distillation we did.
Okay.
Rye is a very difficult grain to ferment in the first place. Yep. And to extract the starch out of it, we wanted to maximize the conversion ratio. So we did use enzymes, which was very unique. We also used, atypically for the industry, we used a wine yeast for the fermentation on that.
All right. And what were you trying to pull out of it then with the wine yeast as opposed to just...
So what we were trying to do, because of my background in the wine industry, we were trying to pull out more floral notes out of the rye rather than the spicy notes.
Did that work?
But those floral notes really toned down over the years.
Okay.
And the spicy came to the forefront.
Yeah.
So I guess what we proved on that was most grains, rye specifically, will be what it is.
If you give it enough time, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that's good. And just so you know, Davin's got another one as well. He had 2. So 2 out of the 108, maybe he had more, but he was drinking one with me way back when, so 3 years ago. But he said he had another one upstairs. So maybe you can convince Davin. If you're going to give up some stuff, like the Eau de Vie from how many years ago? 30 years ago, roughly, he can give up that bottle. I think Davin should do that for you. This is Dolph poking him a little bit, but you did have those 2 jobs to start with, and I'm wondering what you learned at your 2 jobs before you finally got into wine, which is what you wanted at the time. So what did you learn from those that you kind of brought with you?
So what I learned from the oil industry is I didn't want to work in the oil industry.
Okay.
That's literally what I learned.
Okay.
I did learn a lot about pumps and hoses and all that wonderful stuff that was necessary, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't a passion. The wine industry, on the other hand, I worked at Jordan and St. Michel Cellars at our main facility in St. Catharines, Ontario. But we had wineries across the country at the time. We had one in Surrey, BC. We had one in Calgary. We had one in Dauphin, Manitoba, believe it or not.
Oh, okay. You wouldn't expect that, but...
Our parent company was Carling O'Keefe Brewery.
All right.
So not only did I get a chance to work in the wine industry, I also had the opportunity to work for the parent company on beer. Way back then, we were actually working on shandies in beer. Flavored beers are very common today.
Wow. Yeah.
But when I was working on those, which would have been around 82 or 83, nobody was doing flavored beers.
No, it was all light and it was cold, and that was about it. It was
Yeah.
that's it. Light cold beer.
So we launched a product called Ice Cap, was the name of it. And
Okay.
it was a shandy. That's very typical Irish type shandy. Wonderful
All right.
product, failed miserably in the market. I seem to, in my initial part of my career, worked for companies that were very much ahead of their time in a lot of ways. If we go to the Reader Distillery, eau de vies are quite common now, and people are enjoying them. You know, there's bars that are set up for all of the fruit eau de vies, but back then nobody knew what to do with them.
Okay. Well, I agree completely. And right now, though, there is a resurgence, and it's fantastic. And I don't know how much time you spent in BC, but I'm guessing it should be the same thing around the Niagara region, with wine being so important, the wine industry being important, that an eau de vie would seem to be kind of a natural progression. And I know Otto would have thought that way back when, but is it coming to fruition now? Do you think if he started now, it would have taken off for him?
I think he would have been far more successful today.
Okay.
I got to work for a variety of mentors over the years. Back in the wine industry, a gentleman named Bill Anderson, who you will never have heard of, was very much my initial mentor in product development.
Okay.
And moving on to Otto Reader, he was very much ahead of his time, very process driven.
Okay.
Really cared about the quality of the liquids, but wasn't a great marketer.
Okay.
Then John Hall came
Great
along.
marketer. Okay.
Absolutely fantastic marketer, changed the face of Canadian whiskey. He was able to bring to life things that never would have happened without him.
And that was 1992 with John Hall, right? Okay.
1992 is when John Hall came in.
Now, I'd like you to set the scene, if that's okay, because you're already working there. He comes in, he talks to Mr. Reader, Otto, and asks him, figures out a way to buy this distillery, and he was already in the wine industry. So he was doing still fairly well for himself before he started this distillery with you. And then he gets into this distillery where there's the element of unknown. He doesn't know how well he's going to do. In that context, could you tell me how you and he kind of got together to come up with the ideas? Because you had the 3 grain and the double barrels, what you started with, right? Or were they both simultaneous, or was it 3 grain?
They were both launched simultaneously.
Was the idea both conceived at the same time?
Yes, they were. The idea was to do barrel select, which was very much in the Canadian whiskey tradition.
Yep.
In taste profile and aroma. And then 3 grain, which was a little bit more out there because it was very barley forwarded. So it wasn't as mainstream, shall we say.
Okay. Yeah.
What we have to really fully understand, Mr. Reader was very technical oriented, but the distillery was failing. John Hall was actually brought in to wind down the company. And we all knew that.
Okay. Yeah.
It was very an emotional time.
Okay.
John came into the company, spent a few months analyzing it, what was going on, and decided, you know what, there's potential here. This shouldn't be wound down. This facility and the products that are here, there's a seed of a new company. And he took that and ran with it. His passion was and still is really infectious.
Mm-hmm.
We went from a company where we were all kind of going through the motions to a very empowered company.
Nice. Okay. And that's a great feeling too. Someone comes in and it's a 180. It's not we're shutting you down, but I have complete faith in your ability to not just make a living with this, but to excel. And I'm wondering if he had that vision or you both had this vision at the beginning or not. Was it just that you can make a go at it, or did you have higher ambitions, or did he have higher ambitions and he just made it happen type thing, or he was the empowering notion behind? I'm not sure.
You know, John was the visionary.
Okay.
He saw the potential, and for lack of a better term, he got us all to buy into that vision and was very successful in getting us all revved up and ready to go with this new direction for the company.
Okay. Well, that's good, but I still want to focus on your role here, and I'm trying to pull it out. And I'm having a great time with this. For one, I've had several friends text me today. They're really happy that I was doing this because I've been talking about doing this for a little while. So Robin Robinson, for example, he texted me today, and he says that you're one of the most unsung heroes in Canadian whiskey history type thing. So there's accolades out there for you and what you've done. And I'm going to go to a recent article which commemorated your 35 years here. And I've got a couple quotes. So if I can find my quotes, because I always like my quotes. I always have too many of them, actually. But here we go. So this is the one. I started working here in this building in 1987, and I've never left. And the author goes on to say that though hadn't left, not exactly the same blender as you were way back when. And then your response to that, I believe your response was this: I think it's time, it's experience, it's maturity, and that it's kind of like whiskey. You can relate it to a whiskey in the barrel. When you first put the whiskey in the barrel, it's young and it's brash. And over the years, it mellows and matures into something completely different than what it was when it went into the barrel. So I'd like to expand on this, but I'm wondering if you did have brash years, because when I've seen you, you don't seem like the brash person. However, if I worked with you, I might see that side. And I'm wondering if it's back there somewhere.
I've been known to be a little intense, shall we say, on the production side.
Okay, good.
I don't like to go slowly into things.
Okay.
I kind of mellowed in that way, in that I accept that some things do take time to do. But even today, I'm more than willing to jump in and help in any area to just get things done.
Okay, good. You're a worker bee. You just get her done. I like that. And Chris has a little comment on the bottom if you could see it as well. But don't listen to Chris. If he wanted to be on here, we would have had him on here, and he could have been insulting you too. But
I think he's making these comments because he's a little disappointed he's not on.
You know what? He's in the limelight all Saturday and Sunday. He's been working his buns off for this too, right? So, Bill, you're going to have an exciting weekend. He's going to have an exciting weekend. I'll be online watching it. I'll be drinking whiskey in my backyard with some friends at the same time, and we'll be streaming you as much as we can. I didn't pay for the tastings. I should have at one point, and that way I could have heard all four of you at the same time. So you're brash, you mellowed over time. I really like the analogy with the whiskey, and that's why I put it up there. I think it's fun. I'd like you to compare, if you can, the whiskey that you did in 1987. I think it was 87. So your first whiskey that you did with the one that you did, let's say, 10 years later, or what you're doing now. So do you have a progression for what your whiskey tasted like over the years? I know we could go to the special releases every year and talk about that, but I'm wondering about big kind of categories for you. Did you change in big steps at all?
I would say the whiskeys that we were producing back in the 80s were kind of rough and coarse. They were meant to be cash cows to offset the production of the eau de vies. So they were meant to bring in money. They didn't have a lot of finesse to them. They were great as mixers. I wouldn't say many people drank them straight, neat, or just on ice. Whereas as we progressed, we tried to make our whiskeys more approachable. And virtually all of our whiskeys, from Barrel Select on up to Confederation Oak and the limited releases, you can use them as mixers if you wish, but you can also enjoy them neat.
Yeah. And well, I'm a neat guy. I like it all neat generally. And when I do things on Tuesday with Blair, we have to have it neat. If we can't do something neat and enjoy it, I don't think it's worth really promoting. And so this is lovely neat, and Confederation Oak was lovely neat. My wife likes the double barrel more than the Confederation Oak. I don't know why, but she's a little bit strange sometimes, but I can understand. She likes things a little bit with gumption. But we also have Foxheart. So I'd like to talk about Foxheart, and we can see it just on the side, just there,
right,
kind of to the side. And that was your first, I think, I think it was your first collaboration. So we see a new era right now where it's people are going bigger and better with more unique collaborations. You did that with the Niagara's Bench. No, in Niagara, Bench Brewing. That's who it was. And
so that's Taproom. That's the collaboration with Bench.
Oh, sorry, not Foxheart. What's Foxheart then? Foxheart was.
So Foxheart is actually Foxheart is a collaboration, but we haven't made a big deal of that.
Oh, okay.
So we're part of the Campari group.
Yeah.
We have a number of distilleries throughout the world, some making aged liquids, some not. And that actually was a collaboration with Joy Spence from Appleton Rum.
Okay, right.
And the idea for that product actually came about. Joy and I were both attending the National Sales Convention out in Victoria, BC, actually. And we were sitting around a fire in the lobby of the hotel one night, and Joy and I were doing what you expect master blenders do. We sat around and we talked about liquids, rum and whiskey.
Yeah.
And we talked about the similarities between rum and whiskey. And that's where the idea came to add just a splash of 12-year-old rum to Canadian whiskey, just to bring in different nuances that you don't normally get in Canadian whiskey. It's quite a pleasant product.
Yep.
It is different. It's not for everyone. And I'm actually happy when a product we produce has some controversy and not everyone likes it.
Good.
If everyone likes it, those are good to have, but the special products, it's nice to have ones that one person may like and one person may hate, because all of our taste profiles are completely different from each other.
Yep.
So having somebody say they don't like one of our whiskeys doesn't really offend me, because I can give you one that you will like.
Well, as long as they can tell you why, I think is important. Like, you don't have to like it, but I like to know why. So if I give a friend a whiskey for whatever reason, I don't like it, and they're not able to really express it, you don't learn anything. I can't help you out with something else in the future. Bob Baxter from Two Brewers, same thing. He hates it when people say, I love all of, because they do batches. So they're up to batch 27. So batch. I love all of them. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. Why do you love all 27? We do things completely different for all of them. I want to know what you like, what you don't like, and why. Not because I'm going to maybe give you the best whiskey of the world, but maybe I can adapt what I do to all these. I don't know. I don't want to say it like this. I don't want to say that you want to have one whiskey that everyone loves, even though I think you would love that if you had one whiskey, everyone in the world loved it, and you were the master blender of the millennium. You would love that. But I think realistically, we're looking for different tastes with different people, right? And
absolutely, there's a reason why both Coke and Pepsi exist in the world.
And can you taste the difference between Coke and Pepsi? I know
I actually can.
Okay. And the other thing is, I think you've been in the industry for long enough that you're not going to take offense if someone dislikes something, but I think you have enough chutzpah to know that you can create just about anything that you wanted to, right? That's what I think you would be at. But I want to continue with the collaboration. So you did that with Foxheart, so collaboration with rum, and the first collaboration. This one was different though when you did it with the beer barrels.
Yeah, so that was a collaboration. That was a collaboration with Bench.
Yeah.
And what we did is we sent Bench. They were actually Confederation oak barrels.
Yep.
We sent them to Bench. They brewed 4 different types of beer in them, barrel aged them.
Yeah.
Once they had done the beers, which were fantastic, by the way, we got the barrels back and we did secondary aging of whiskey in those barrels, which introduced some of the beer notes to the whiskey. It's a very different style of whiskey. You really get the hop notes. You actually get some yeasty notes out of it. It's a very different experience. And I can tell you that it's a very easy drinking whiskey.
And we reviewed it, and I remember going it down, but I think I only had a small amount, and I told Blair to get me more, but he didn't. Well, he's a good guy anyways. I like him. So those 2 collaborations, they went well. And is it enticing you to do more collaborations later on, or was it something that you did and now you're done?
No, we are looking to the future for more collaborations.
Okay.
Within our own company and outside. The collaborations, I'll use a John Hall term.
Okay.
He always said that it gives you another paint to paint on your canvas when you bring things in from outside. And it's really true. I love when we can get different notes out of whiskey by the fermentations we use, the distillation techniques, but you can also get things from outside. And our Canadian whiskey regulations allow us that flexibility. And some of our competitors are doing some wonderful things with different techniques. You know, you can look at what Bareface is doing. And
yes,
it's great that we kind of spawned that innovation in Canadian whiskey.
And I'm going to come back to Bareface and come back to you later when talking about something so terribly unique. But there was a couple questions on the side I'd like to address. So Kent, my buddy, asked, how many times do you actually use, or were I'm guessing he's asking about the Confederation oak barrels. How many times were they used, or can they still be used and keep the Canadian oak kind of a flavor to it, do you think?
So for most whiskey barrels, we will use them up to 7 cycles, a cycle being the aged. For the Confederation oak, we don't do that.
Oh, okay.
The Confederation oak barrels, I think we've maxed out at 4 cycles on those.
Okay. I wonder why, because maybe I just don't understand, because it's a denser wood. So I thought if it was a denser wood, it would take longer to extract the flavors. Does that make sense, or is it opposite somehow?
So the Canadian oak barrels we're using for secondary aging. So the whiskeys have already been aged. We blend them together. Then we do secondary aging in the Confederation oak barrels to pull out different nuances from those barrels.
Right.
What I'm finding, excuse me, is after about 4 cycles, not getting out of the wood what I expect to get.
Okay.
So those barrels then go just into our regular barrel program. They're no longer used for the Confederation oak.
And at what point did you give that to your brewing friends? So where in the cycle was it? Towards the 4th at the end? So
those ones had already gone through 4 cycles.
Okay. And then they did it. So 4 different beers. I'm going to ask Chris if he has. Chris, if you're still on here, I'd like to know what beers those were so I could see if I can get my hands on them. Because what would be great is to actually have those 4 beers and to have tap room side by side in a tasting, and just kind of see if we can pick out notes that are back and forth through it. I think that'd be fun. So we'll see if that works. And here's the other question. This is from Dave. And this is a great point, because you don't like typically, and I think you said this last year, you don't like barrel proof. You did with Master Cut. Give us something that was a little bit higher in proof. But do you think you're ever going higher than that? Because it's a year later. Maybe you've changed your mind a little bit about barrel proof. Maybe not.
So my problem with higher strengths, higher proofs, is you get into this war over proofs. And maybe other people have stronger tolerance for alcohol than I do.
Okay.
But I find that I lose some of the nuances of the whiskey when we get up into higher strength. Even Master's Cut, we did it our own way. We kind of got knocked around that, how can 48.5 be barrel strength? Well, guess what? It really was barrel strength.
For that whiskey at that time in that barrel. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not going to say we won't do higher proofs. With the revival of the cocktail scene again,
okay,
a higher proof whiskey does stand up better in cocktails than your typical 40% alcohol whiskey.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't want to disclose anything, but I'm not going to dismiss the idea, shall we say.
Let's do that and keep it there, and we'll cross our fingers because we like this. Well, and Dave's having another comment there. We can say that you can lose the nuance, but you can tailor it where you're comfortable with the water. And let's lead into another question with that. Do you think it has the same effect when you do put the water? Because that's an argument I use all the time. You know what? I'm going to buy cast strength, and if I want it lower for whatever reason, I'll add water to it. Does that have the same effect of me trying to do that, getting it down to 46% or 45, just like this one is, than you getting it or having it consistently at 45? Is there a difference when I'm doing it myself and when you're doing it?
I think there absolutely is a difference.
Is it the water possibly, or is it the process? Yep.
I don't know the quality of the water that you're using.
Okay.
I know the quality of the water that we use.
Got it. Okay.
And not just any water will do. Chlorine, which is, found in most of our municipal water supplies,
yep,
has a really detrimental effect on whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the fact, I'm a firm believer, and maybe it's because of my wine background, in a term called bottle shock. that when you make a blend, it doesn't initially taste to its potential. It has to rest and marry together. So when you're adding water to your whiskey, you're shocking it again.
Okay.
And it needs to rest in that glass before you really get all of the nuances that you're trying to get out of it. So, no, I don't think it's the same effect. And maybe it's the control freak in me, but I want to send it out where I think it's best.
Got it. Well, I'm the cast strength guy, and I'll always be pushing for cast strength because I like it. But we don't have to agree on this. We don't. And some people are they always think I'm a Scotch snob because I do it. And I'm looking at Davin when he says it, because I always say I want cast strength, and he says you're a Scotch snob and that's why you want cast strength. But maybe he's coming around to me a little bit now, because I think he's appreciated a couple that I've sent him or that I've had with him. Let's continue with this, and let's go with this one right here. This is a quote from you, and I believe you were referring to the release of Resolve when this quote came out. So I'm still kind of chasing that holy grail, the very first release that we did in 2007. This one's probably the closest I've come so far. And again, I can't remember if it was Resolve or maybe Victory, one of those two. The unfortunate part is that we had a lot of very unique liquids that were available for the first release that are no longer available. And I'm wondering if, are you still looking for that? Do you still have that perception of really unique whiskeys in the past? Because I think you've been making a lot of whiskey over the past 35 or not 35 years, but for the longest time you've been making whiskey. Do you not have an assortment where you can be as creative as you want? And are you still looking for the holy grail, or do you think you've gotten it this year or last year or the year before? I'm wondering.
So I kind of have a very kind of maybe strange perspective on this subject.
Okay.
I'm always striving for better, always striving to improve on what we have. And I personally feel we haven't reached that level yet. And when you reach that level where you feel you've done the best you can with whiskey, what's the point of continuing on?
That's when you retire, I guess. You dropped your mic and your avalanche, and it's done, I guess.
Which,
you're not
there's
there.
a whole world out there of whiskeys. There's all kinds of expressions that we want to introduce. Right now, I've got 3 whiskeys on the back burner that haven't been released that could potentially be released, and probably will be at some point.
Are you just waiting for more time, or are you looking for the opportune moment? Is that it?
Well, some of it is convincing people that this whiskey has a place. Other is, this is our 16th limited release.
Yep.
We're now at the point where we have to be thinking further and further ahead. I already have the 2023 release nailed down, what it's going to be.
Is it in barrel and ready, or is it in your mind ready?
It is in barrel and ready.
Okay. Stop. All right. And well, you've said the future as well. So you're forecasting. I want to forecast this right here. In 2018, so you're forecasting stocks to the year 2038. It's and I got this information in 2018. So it was just the amount of years ahead that they were doing. So and it might be longer now. I'm guessing maybe it's 2042. That's my guess. It's an interesting process to go through, thinking, what do we need for that year, building for future generations. So I'm wondering what you mean by forecasting. I think I know what you mean, but I'd like you to tell us what you mean by forecasting what you need, and the interesting process that it is for you.
So forecasting is an interesting process, because what has to happen is you have to think of what you're selling today, what the volumes of that will be in future years, and what other new products you might introduce over those years.
Right. Yeah.
Whiskey is a long-term process, and you're always thinking really far ahead. If you think about this, I've been in the industry 35 years now.
Yeah.
And we're forecasting out and planning, laying down stocks for basically another 35 years.
Okay. Good.
So I know that some of what we're putting down today, I'll never touch. It's kind of a morbid thought, but it's the truth.
No, you're setting up generations. That's a good thought. I like that.
Yeah.
Right? No, I like that thought. It's good. And I'm a teacher, so I think like in those terms, setting things up in the future and being happy with what you've set down. Do you have enough? And I'm wondering if the Campari Group was able to help you put down more stock for the future. Was that your idea and their monetary backing, or was it kind of a global idea? Everybody, we're just going to put down a whole bunch more so that it's ready in the future for whatever we want to do.
So the planning for the future was always part of the process, because you've always got to make sure that you have enough stock to supply future needs. The pandemic kind of really interfered, shall I say, with our plans.
Okay.
We actually had the reverse effect that a lot of companies had during the pandemic. Our whiskey sales soared during the pandemic, and we ate into stocks that were actually destined for future years.
Ooh,
so now there's the mad scramble to try and make up those stocks.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And I didn't even think in those terms. I knew people did well, especially in this business over COVID. But I didn't think of it eating into the stocks, and that does make sense. So it's good. But back to the question, is that a Campari thing where they invest in more and you're able to do more, or have you done kind of the same amount since they took over?
I would say we continued on the trajectory we were on.
Okay. Good. Okay. So you're going.
That's the easy answer to it.
Yep.
We have a lot of more people involved in the process now, which for me is actually a blessing. I was trying to do all of that on my own in the past, and now I don't have to. So in past years, if there was a mistake made, it was all on me.
Yeah. And now, who do you blame?
I can tell you the mistakes were made.
Yeah.
Now we have more people looking at it, and it's much less likely that we're going to make a mistake.
Okay.
Because we have more eyes on it.
Do you feel that it's less personal for you then? Or because you've trained these people, maybe that it's the same?
No, I'm very much personally involved, and in the process, people know I will have my own opinions, and sometimes they're at cross purposes to others.
Okay.
And when I truly believe in something, I will fight for it.
Good. I like that. I tried to get some information from Chris a couple of years ago about conversations between you and Hall and some arguments. I wanted to get some dirt, something, but he wouldn't let anything up. So Chris is a good guy. You should keep on to him because he's tight-lipped. But I could picture, because I think you're both fairly strong-willed, that there would have been a time that you're not agreeing on the same thing and some pretty hefty arguments coming out of that room. I think would have been kind of neat.
Yeah. One really good product for us now, which is our original cream liqueur.
Yep.
actually came out of one of those arguments
Okay.
because John wanted us to get into flavored whiskeys.
Yep.
And I thought, what's the most ridiculous flavored whiskey I can come up with that, will get me out of producing flavored whiskeys?
Okay. And
That's
that
where
was
the
it.
cream idea was born from.
And it backfired.
It backfired on me in a very good way,
That's
but
good.
that
Okay.
was, I will tell you, I did lose most of the arguments with John because he would somehow take my ideas and turn them around. It was a very interesting dynamic.
It sounds like my wife. I think Hall is my wife, who's the extrovert. You're kind of like me, maybe an introvert-ish that kind of gets out of the shell a bit, and they just turn it on us somehow. We're honest people. We do everything we can. We know what we like and love, but they're just twisting it. I'm saying this for her benefit. How about this? So this came out and this did pretty well. I think it did well here in Western Canada. I'm not sure if it did well everywhere else.
It did very well everywhere.
Good. Okay.
That product, when we launched it, was originally forecasted to sell 5,000 cases.
Okay.
In the first year. It sold 35,000.
So okay. So before Christmas, they called you back and it's like, we've got to amp up production on this. When it happens, do they phone and they say stop production on this and start that? Is that what happens?
No.
Okay.
No. We do monthly planning, weekly planning, and all of supply chain, which is the production division.
Yep.
Their job is to make sure, no matter what the forecast says, you have what is really needed.
Okay.
So it's a full-time job monitoring that, making changes to the production schedule in enough time to react, and being ahead of the market, essentially.
Okay. Well, you're obviously at their whim to a certain degree, and the market, or the whim of the market and what the market wants. But I'm wondering how much of your job would you think is creativity versus business acumen, where you're thinking this will work and you have to convince people that it's going to work, as opposed to being creative? How much do you have to think about the business where you are now?
So for me, it's mainly the creative process.
Good.
I'm less and less involved in the how do we sell it? How do we produce it? I get to do what I love, which is create liquids.
Okay. So would you say it's like 5% in the back of your mind, or can you push it out down to 2 or 1% where you can almost not even care?
I'd love to lie to you and say that it's down to the point where I don't care.
Okay. But
I would say it's still probably 40%.
Ooh,
but that's
okay.
That's a real decrease for me.
Okay. All right. Good. Now, I'm going to throw another quote that you said. So I find whiskey making very much a mental process, and I'm thinking in my head about what flavors will combine correctly. This might have been last year, and I think I might have gotten it online. And sorry, not online, when I was listening to Whiskey Weekend. I think that's when I got it.
Mm-hmm.
You're still there, but I want to kind of go to not the negative, but you've made a lot of whiskeys. You've had a lot of whiskey go through your hands into barrels, into the choices you've made. Is there any choices that you think, I shouldn't have used that much of this? It could have helped a lot for something now. Does that come off very often? Yes, yourself, I guess.
You know, we all second guess things.
Yep.
And yeah, some of the age stocks
Mhm.
at the very beginning when we were starting out, when sales didn't increase as rapidly as
As we
we
wanted.
hoped they would.
Yep.
In those early years, we sold off a lot of whiskey stocks
Mm,
that I would kill to have today.
okay. Well, and there's that money thing again too, right? What people do to have to make it happen. But you
Yeah,
were a
we are.
smaller distillery. If you were your size now, obviously, and you had the financial backing of Campari, you wouldn't have had to. But I talk often to the smaller guys, and they're just getting whiskey, and they have to get it out because they want to make money. And if they don't go into the gins and into the other kind of liqueurs, they've got to make money. So it's a sad thing, but I don't know if you want to kick yourself about it too much. It would have been fun. But I do want to know what keeps you up at night, because you're thinking about whiskey, but I don't know if you're thinking about whiskey at night. You might be thinking about something else. What keeps you up at night, kind sir?
You know, currently, because we're at the point where we're doing our annual release,
Yep.
it's, will it be as well received as I think the liquid deserves?
Okay.
You know, when I look back at last year's release, Master's Cut,
Mm-hmm.
it was a complete departure for us. And
Okay.
there was a lot of worry. Will this sell out? Will it be well received? In the end, it was unfounded worry because it was well received. It did sell out. And right now, it's the same thing with Art of the Blend. Will people like it?
Yep.
And I guess it's not will people like it, but will enough people like it that they will appreciate it?
Well, it's not coming out west very easily. So if it comes out here, we have it more. But I think your market, I think they're looking at how fast it could sell out before Whiskey Weekend. I think that might be some type of a point of honor, a point of fidelity to yourself. I think if you sell out quickly, you're pretty happy.
We did it a little bit differently this year.
Okay.
In that we didn't actually release it to the marketplace until Monday of this week.
Ooh,
So
okay.
just the week before Whiskey Weekend. So there wasn't any thought that it would sell out to Whiskey Weekend.
Okay.
We also shipped it to Alberta, to BC, in time for it to be released virtually simultaneously.
Well, and I got mine on Tuesday. So Chris and Michaela, we're going to thank both of them for getting this to me. And I think it's fantastic, but I like it after 15 minutes. My initial on the nose was kind of like matchstick. What's the scent? A sulfurish on the nose for my first pour. And as your nose got inclined to that, it augmented the flavor somehow. And I did want to ask you about this. I should have done this right at the beginning and talked about this. Could you tell us, there was a question about the mash bill. If you want to tell us about that, you go right ahead. But tell us a little bit about this bottle, please, and the conception for it in the first place. So I'm guessing you thought about this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, come up with this?
So actually the thought process behind this blend was done many, many years ago.
Okay.
And it was just waiting for the right opportune time to release it.
Okay. And your 35th anniversary is a good time, I think.
Yeah.
No,
And this product really ties together my two main careers in wine and in spirits. You know, we introduce a very, and I want to be very clear, it's an extremely small portion of winter harvest wine.
Yep.
And that wine is a blend of Riesling and Vidal grapes.
Okay.
to me, it adds that you almost get a strawberry jam aroma off
I
of it.
did get jammy. I said that to my wife.
And I will agree with you that you get kind of a sulfurous note on the first pour, but that dissipates really quickly in the glass, I find.
I didn't know if it dissipated or I just got used to it. So
I believe it dissipates.
Okay. And we said jammy, and there's a strength to it that I like more. There's some heft in the background as well. So flavors in the back of the palate for me that I'm liking as well for it. So
yeah, it is a little bit more rye forward blend than we typically do.
Okay. Do you want to tell us percentage, or is that hush hush?
I don't go into formulations.
Okay, so we're not going to say that. Just more rye than usual, and less corn than usual, and more barley than usual. That would have been my guess.
The barley is about the same level. The increased rye tones down the percentage of corn.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm kind of right. I'll give myself that with the rye up. But
what I also find really interesting about this liquid.
Yep.
I've tried it with a number of different people.
Oh, okay.
And there's a really personal difference in the finish on this liquid.
Oh.
Some people get an explosion of spice on the finish. Some people are telling me for them the finish drops right off.
I don't have either, because I go from spice to sweet and it comes back a little bit spicy at the end. So I have a fluctuation of it. So yeah, the initial spice, but not a lot. I love my rye, so maybe I'm dulled to it a bit. But
and then there's a blast of sweetness, and then there's that rye in the finish.
Yeah, so that's it. So it's a fluctuation in there. It's not just one, and I wouldn't say it's a short finish either. It's a medium long finish.
Yeah, it's intriguing in what the liquid does in your mouth. It's not often that you will get a spirit that gives you an initial taste thought and then changes into something completely different and then changes again.
It's true. I do like to be able to, I like a consistency in the nose and the palate. I don't like it when they're divergent or they're too divergent. It throws me off somehow. Are you the same? Do you look to have the same, or one leading into the other? Because this is very similar from the nose to the palate. I don't find a big difference.
For my opinion, the nose should match the taste. Every once in a while, I will get thrown and I will have something that from the aroma, I think it's going to taste this way. And it doesn't, and it kind of annoys me, is the easiest way to put it.
I'm the same way. Sometimes it's good, though. You're annoyed and you get over it, and then you can see how there's positive elements to it. But I do like a consistency. The finish, I never really know until I get into it, because a young whiskey will give you a lot of flavor right up front, a lot of rye right up front, and I like that. But this is not just unidimensional. It does go sweet. Spice, sweet, spice at the end. But the spice, I don't know if you differentiate. I get spice at the front, then sweet, then spice at the back.
Yeah, I'm tasting exactly the same way you are.
All right. Well, it's a good dram. And so everyone out there, if you get it, I don't know how many cases we get in Alberta, but it's a art of the blend. Sorry, that was a question. How many bottles did you make of this, not just for Alberta and BC, but in all?
So there were 7,800 bottles made in total of that.
Wow. So it shouldn't be that hard to get our hands on it. Good.
No, and I believe there were 400 cases sent out to Alberta.
Nice. And I was told that you're going to Calgary in October.
Sorry?
Are you going to Calgary in October? I was told you have
I'm supposed to be.
Excellent. And you just found out about it recently. So
I did.
That's funny. Is it Calgary and Edmonton, or are you staying south?
Strictly Calgary.
Strictly Calgary. Well, I'm hoping to see you at one point. It'd be really good to see you in person. I have so many other questions, but I'm going to give one. I like this one, and it's a quote as well. Here's my last quote of the day for you. So, in North America and Scotland, we use enzymes to convert starch to sugar. The Japanese are using fungi to accomplish the same thing, and their yields are so much higher. It gives unique taste. And I'm wondering if you still have that idea. Do you think that the Canadian population is ready for fungi? I am. But I'm wondering if generally it is something that you could convince the marketing people to do.
I think it's too soon.
Okay.
The Japanese whiskey market is riding a real high right now.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether you know that their regulations just recently changed.
Yeah. And well, they're more transparent. I'm fine with that. I'm good with that.
I am as well. The difference is a lot of what's been sold as Japanese whiskey really isn't Japanese whiskey.
Yeah, some Scotch. Well, Scotch and some Canadian whiskey as well. Not just Scotch. It was Canadian as well.
So true Japanese whiskey has a different taste. It's more earthy.
Yep. You get the umami notes that you don't really get here.
Exactly. So. And I'm not sure we're quite ready for that yet.
Okay. And I'm gonna hit the last question. So in one of my conversations with Chris, he said Canadian whiskey is experiencing an age of great innovation and growth. And I said this to him as well. So as distillers challenge each other to come up with new and exciting blends, he credits 40 Creek with helping launch a new golden age of Canadian whiskey. And you talked about as well, you and John Holland, what you did when you first came out. So the 3 grain and the double barrel when that came out and how you changed the landscape in Canada. And I agree with that. But here's what I do want to ask. So whiskey and Canadian whiskey, huge renaissance now, and all the micro distilleries as well. You challenge each other, and there's tremendous amount of freedom to be innovators. So do you believe that you're still able to innovate? I'm going to assume it's yes. The second question, if it is yes, is who's kind of pushing you at this point in time? Is it the small guys, the big guys, or is it a team of people around you that just want to be freaky and do something neat? I'm just wondering where you get the push sometimes.
We have a lot of push internally for innovation. Being a global company and Canadian whiskey not really being at the forefront of our company, there's the push to come up with something that will be more internationally accepted.
Okay.
Part of our rebranding and repackaging of our whiskeys is to do that, to bring in the concept of Niagara whiskey. When you talk to people in Europe and you say you're from Canada, they'll want to know, okay, where in Canada are you from? If you say Grimsby, they'll go, where's that? If you say Niagara, they know where that is.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're extremely proud of our Niagara roots. And now we're making the statement that we're making Niagara whiskey.
Perfect. I like it. Supplementary question, because I still want to eke on this just a little bit. When you go to a whiskey shop and you're sitting in the lobby with friends from, let's say, a rum distillery or some other type of distillery, who do you hang out with more often? Is it friends that you've known, or do people search you out a lot, Bill, and you end up in other conversations with younger distillers? So I'm wondering if it's kind of more the men and women that you've been doing this with over the last 35 years, or is it kind of the newer people who you're kind of gathering
I would say it's the newer people.
Okay.
And
Good.
the conversations usually start because they want to talk to me about what we've done, and they're trying to do this. What do I think they should do? That kind of thing. But what's
Yeah.
really interesting about those conversations is,
Mhm.
yeah, they're trying to get my advice and information, but I'm
Mhm.
also picking up from them what they're doing. And some of the stuff that's being done by those small distilleries is really
Pretty cool.
inspiring.
Yeah. I like that. And it's a little bit out there, and they can get away with it because they don't have a production team behind them saying maybe not. Maybe, right?
Yeah,
I don't want to put people down. It's just when you get bigger, it's harder to do exactly what you want when you want, right?
well, as you get, when you're a small company, yes, you're struggling to make cash, to put more whiskeys down, to produce more products, but you do have a little bit more freedom than you do in a larger company.
Yeah.
When we're looking at products, 7,800 bottles is about as low as we can go and satisfy everybody in the company that this is going to make enough money to be worthwhile.
Okay.
Whereas if you're a really small distillery, you can go back to those days when we made 108 bottles of the 22-year-old rye.
One barrel.
Yeah.
It's good. Well,
So in some ways, I'm very envious of those smaller distilleries.
yeah.
And I love to hear what they're doing. And my thought is, okay, could we scale that up? Because we have to always think of scale. It doesn't mean we lose that innovation, we lose that flexibility, but we're still always thinking about scale.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm really appreciative of this time, and I'm glad you're taking on kind of the teacher role out there too, from one teacher to I think you're a teacher. You're a master blender. Were you ever a master distiller? Did you ever think of yourself a master distiller, or was always the blend? Sorry, I wanted to put that right at the beginning.
So I have been very much involved in the distillation
Yeah.
over the years. I actually learned distillation here in this building from, it's always interesting. When you have a distillery, there's usually two people that play off. There's whether you want to call them the owner or the controller.
Okay.
And then there's usually somebody in the background who's actually doing things. Mr. Reeder was definitely at the forefront. He was the idea man. He made the final decisions. But there was a gentleman here named Gerhard Kohn, who was a master distiller. He had graduated from the University of Geisenheim in Germany.
Ooh, okay.
And I learned the ropes on distillation from him. So I never gave myself the title. I never thought of myself that way.
Okay.
Even today, the Master Blender title, sure, it's a great title. I don't necessarily think of myself that way.
Okay.
I think of myself as this guy who's in the background doing innovations and product development.
Well, maybe you're just a guy with many hats that just likes to have fun and do what he wants to do. But let you do what you want to do. Let him do what he wants to do. And I'm really happy we had this time together. I've kept you for an hour and 14 minutes. I'm sorry. I could ask you questions for a couple hours after this, but my wife said that it's later for you, and it is. It's what time is it there now? It's 10:15. 10:15. Well, I'll be thinking about this interview for a while, and what I will be doing this weekend is I will be looking at this guy with the Whiskey Weekend, and you'll be talking to Davin, you'll be talking to Blair, and Chris will be there, and hopefully everyone can go into this, get an idea, we can see you online. You can, if you're there, definitely go to the distillery tours, live music, go to this. I'm gonna ask someone if I can get a link to your the Ages seminar, or through the Ages seminar, I should say. I'm gonna try to pull some strings with some friends so I could see both of those. But it's yeah, I know I really shouldn't, but I just want to. And I'll have friends, and we'll be finished. I'm not going to say finishing off, but we're going to have a hefty portion of this with the 3 or 4 other releases over the past couple of years. We'll be going back and forth and enjoying those. And I got to say thank you. Thank you very much. This was fun.
Thank you. It was a very good time.
And you're well deserving of that 35-year anniversary bottle. And ladies and gentlemen, if come back next Tuesday, we'll do it for 15 minutes next Tuesday, because it won't be an interview with the person, the head honcho, the head creator, the master blender, Bill, right to the side. Thank you very much, kind sir. And thank all of you for watching today and watching in the future. And if you have the chance, Whiskey Weekend's where you want to be this weekend and watching. Thanks so much, everybody. Slancha. And I got the smallest bit left, and so cheers to all of you.
Mine's empty, and I don't want to pour another one on screen.
I'm doing it myself because I'm here for a couple hours still. Good night, everybody.
Good night.